Hello, happy week 5, whatever day you're watching this. This is week 5, so we are approaching halfway through our quarter 4. We're getting really close to the end of the year, which is super exciting. So, this is our plan for the week. If you are watching this, of course, it's because you were absent either both or one of our synchronous days. So, our plan this week is to continue working our way through the book and working on a few things in our Google Slides together. You'll notice that we are going to be reading multiple chapters this week, and it's because they're shorter chapters. Instead of taking 30 minutes per chapter to read it, they're about 10-ish minutes. So in class, we're going to be reading chapters 7 and 8, and then working through some questions with those. And then for asynchronous work, you're going to be reading chapters 9, 10, and 11. And I know it sounds like a lot, but I promise you it's the same amount of time it would take you as it has in the past. So, and continue to work on Patricia's advice and golden lines in your Google Drive. So to start, let's work on a reflective writing prompt. Last week, you were supposed to read chapter 6 for your asynchronous work. So this quote says, "From an adult's point of view, I was destructive and out of control, but as a child, I didn't think of it that way. I never wanted to destroy, I wanted to create. I wasn't burning my eyebrows, I was creating fire. I wasn't breaking overhead projectors, I was creating chaos to see how people reacted." So I want you to think about a time in your own life when an adult misunderstood you. You kind of feel similar to how Trevor felt in this story that he shares. So tell me, what did that feel like? And can you relate to that statement about being creating something versus being destructive? Kind of think about what it's like to be a kid, a teenager, and maybe sometimes being misunderstood by adults. So go ahead and respond to this question. Pause this video. Okay, so after responding to that question, let's do some review of what we read in chapter 6. So there was a lot in chapter 6. He describes himself as being kind of hyperactive and just eating all the time and getting into trouble and doing lots of pranks. And he has several ways that he describes his relationship with his mom in terms of when he was doing things he wasn't supposed to. He described it as a cop and a criminal in the movies, or it later turned into something like courtroom drama with two lawyers constantly debating over loopholes and technicalities, which is a pretty interesting way to kind of view your relationship with a parent in terms of getting in trouble and not doing what you're supposed to. And we learned that Patricia tried to learn how to outwit Trevor as he got older. You can look at that with the toffee apple story on page 81. But Trevor says that he always knew his mom wasn't going to hurt him in terms of getting a spanking for discipline, because she was always disciplining him out of love because she cared for him. And then the reason this chapter is called Loopholes is because he talks about finding loopholes in arguments, or if there was something that he just could not reason with, it didn't make any logical sense to him, he would try to find loopholes to go around that. And then we learned that Patricia, his mother, started dating Abel, Trevor's stepdad, when he was 7. And then we end the chapter by hearing about the story of when he set a house on fire when he was a kid. It was the house that Abel was living at. He was renting from this family. He was messing around with a magnifying glass and trying to burn shapes into the ground or wood or something, and then accidentally burned down a whole house. So that was chapter 6. Okay, so if you're watching this video and you were absent on our first synchronous day, so that would either be Tuesday or Wednesday, you need to make sure you read chapter 7 and 8. This one's called Foofy, and this one is called Robert. So you can see this is, according to Audible, this is how long each, if you're reading kind of at an average pace, that's how long it should take you to read these chapters. So I know it looks like a lot, but they're much shorter and they're pretty quick to get through. So this is what we'll be reading. So after reading chapter 7, I want you to respond to this question. In this quote, he says, "That experience shaped what I felt about relationships for the rest of my life. You do not own the thing that you love." So Trevor tells the story about his dog Foofy and what that relationship was like for him to have his own pet. So I want you to use examples from this chapter. How did Trevor come to learn this lesson with the incident regarding Foofy? How did he learn that you do not own the thing that you love? So give me some examples from the chapter. Go ahead and pause this video and respond to that. All right, so after reading chapter 8, you have 2 prompts to respond to. The first is this Venn diagram. This chapter is called Robert. It's about his father, and he gives some information about what their relationship was like as he was growing up, because we know that his parents never got married, and they never were in some sort of, bad relationship, but he just didn't see him as often. So after reading this chapter, I want you to write down, kind of describe to me on this side, what do we know about how Trevor lives with his mom? What is life like for him? And then what is life like with Robert? How is that different? And then in the middle, if you can think of anything that has some similarities, please write that down. So take a look back at that chapter and respond to the slide. All right, the last prompt I want you to respond to is this one. So he says in chapter 8, being chosen is the greatest gift you can give to another human being. So I want you to tell me, do you agree or disagree? What personal connections can you make with this statement? What text evidence supports that Trevor was, in fact, chosen by his dad and his mom? So go ahead and pause this video and respond to that question. All right, so we're on day 2, so this should be either Thursday or Friday. Okay, so if you're watching this video and you were gone on Thursday or Friday, this part you won't necessarily be able to do because you're not in person on campus, but we are going to take a quick field trip to the library. You are going to be choosing a book to just kind of explore and read, because I have given you lots of opportunities to see different genres, to kind of hear different book talks, and with our first chapter Fridays. So we're going to have Miss Bezzizo, our librarian, talk about what books are available. She'll give you a tour of the library so you can know where everything's at. And I'm going to give you about 15 minutes to look around and choose one book that interests you for choice reading. So if you were absent on this day, then you'll have to do this another time. But the reason I want us to do this is because I want you to just explore and kind of see what books are available to you. This is not going to be like, I'm not going to ask you to read an entire separate book before the end of the year. This is just to get us exploring. You might find a book and think that it's interesting and start it, and then find out you don't actually like it. You might find a book and think, I don't know, let's give this a shot, and then end up really loving it. So all I want us to do is low stakes. I just want us to kind of get used to the library, figure out what might be interesting to us, and give it a shot and pick a book to start reading. Okay, so now I want to talk about something that I think is so fascinating and so cool, and it's one of the things that I really love about language arts, about English class, and that is something called mirrors and windows. So when you are looking at a story, and this could be, a story in a novel, it could be a story in a film. Stories take place in many different forms. Writing, we know, is very different, and there's lots of different genres within that and categories. But no matter what story you're looking at, you have an opportunity to use that as a mirror or a window. A mirror means that you can see there's something in that story that you can connect with, you can relate to. It's something that maybe you have personal experience with in your own life. You feel like you have empathy in that area because you know what it's like. Stories that make you feel seen because you see parts of your own life and identity reflected in that story. You can connect and relate and understand. A window means that in a story, you get a new perspective or a new thought. The story is able to teach you and open your eyes to parts of the world that you maybe didn't even know existed before. So they both, I think every story definitely has one, but every story has the ability to have both a mirror and a window, to give you the opportunity to see yourself in the story, to relate and connect with it. And it also gives you the opportunity to go, oh, wow, I had no idea that was a possibility. I didn't know that that was something that people do. It gives you a new perspective on the world. And I think that is fascinating. So what I want you to do on the next slide, so far with our Born a Crime book by Trevor, I want you to tell me what are some things that are a mirror for you and a window. So tell me first, for mirrors, what are some things that you maybe share in common with Trevor? Think about things like, do you have a similar personality trait as him? Or do you have an interest that he has as well? Is there a perspective on life that you share with him? Are your emotions and attitudes pretty similar to what his are in the book? Is there a life event or people in your life? Do you have somebody in your life like his mother? So think about anything that you would have in common with him, even if it's a small little detail. And then in the windows category, I want you to tell me, what is something new that Trevor has brought to your mind in reading this book? What is a new perspective, a new thought? What is something that you've learned, something that's kind of opened your eyes a little bit while reading his book? So there should be text boxes in each category. Go ahead and take a few minutes to respond to that. All right, so we are going to do something every week for the rest of the school year, and we're going to look at things that have to do with grammar. So you might be rolling your eyes or taking a deep breath because you just think that this is boring and you've never had a good experience with it. So we're going to ask the question, what is grammar really, and why does it actually matter? Why would we take the time to look at it? So first off, the most simple definition I can give you is that grammar is the structure and rules for writing. This could be something like parts of speech, common errors that we find, grammatical structure, layout, punctuation, all the things that are not super interesting in and of themselves, but they're part of the rules and the structure. So why does it matter then if we're looking at something that kind of seems a little bit boring? Grammar is important because it gives structure to the chaos. It allows us to have structure when writing. You can think of it as the rules of the game. When you know the rules, you can play the game and do it in your own style. So let me give you another metaphor that I think will be helpful. If you had me in class last quarter, this should look familiar to you. I gave you the same metaphor when we were looking at poetry and how some things with poetry are kind of boring when you look at them on their own, but they're important. So it's the same thing. The same type of mentality applies to grammar. When you're looking at nouns and adjectives and commas and semicolons and clauses and phrases, all of that stuff, yes, absolutely, it's pretty boring just looking at it on its own. It's not super interesting. You probably might fall asleep when you're trying to read about it or think about it, but they're necessary. Parts of speech, punctuation, structure. Grammar is like the rules and the referee, the scoreboard, the lines on a court or on a field when you're playing a game. If you don't have those things, it's not going to make any sense. So if you were to go to a football game, a volleyball game, a soccer game, any type of sporting event, and there were no rules, you had no referee or no people on the sidelines or people keeping track of time on the scoreboard, there was no lines anywhere to indicate boundaries, it would be super frustrating to watch that and to try to actually enjoy that, because it just wouldn't make sense. The players would be making stuff up on the go, and if you were playing that game, that would be super frustrating. And that's what grammar is like. When you look at a referee or lines on a field, not super interesting alone, isolated, right? But those things are necessary in order to actually have fun playing the game. So to truly enjoy writing and to get a lot out of that experience, you kind of have to get the boring stuff out of the way. You have to have an understanding of those things in order to get to the fun part. So I hope that's helpful for you to think about it like that. I know it's helpful for me because sometimes we kind of get lost in the fact that this is boring, I don't like it, it's frustrating, and we forget to see that there's a purpose behind it. So what I want you to do is pause this video and watch the video linked in the slides. Does grammar matter? It's a TED Ed video. So pause this video, watch this one, and then we're going to respond to a question. Okay, after watching that video, I want you to tell me, what is one thing you learned? What's one thing that stood out to you? Anything that they said at all, write that down in this box. Okay, one other thing I want to note from this video is this. I paused it and took a screenshot of it. Speech, they were talking about how speech is different from writing and reading because there's just different things involved with it, and that can be something like annotation to show mood. So for those of you that are taking ASL or are maybe interested in it, this was something that I learned when I took ASL that I thought was super interesting. The fact that you use the grammar, basically the grammar for ASL is your facial expressions and the certain ways that you move your face and your body language when you are signing. So if you lower or raise your eyebrows, that indicates that you're asking a yes or no question. If you, it just depends on what facial expressions you're making, but it's kind of like the grammar, which I thought was super cool. So just a side note, that's pretty interesting. Okay. So this, if you're watching this and you were not in person on Thursday or Friday, just shoot me an email instead because I would normally give this to you on a piece of paper. But I want you to tell me what is your decision for our final project? A couple weeks ago, I showed you what the instructions are, and next week we're going to get started with that final project. So I want you to tell me, write down, well, email me, tell me what class period and cohort you're in, and then tell me, are you picking to do the essay or the time capsule? And if you have any questions about that, you can also include that in your email to me. All right, lastly, to end, we have a first chapter Friday. This is All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. And I have a trailer for you. It's actually the trailer for the film. They turned this book into a movie that's on Netflix. So I'm showing you the trailer for the movie, but it depicts what happens in the book. So you can take a look at that. One thing to know with this book, as a trigger warning, this book does deal with anxiety and depression, mental health, and suicide. So if that is a sensitive topic for you, just please be aware if you choose to read it or if you choose to watch the film or even just the trailer itself. The trailer doesn't depict anything that's super intense or anything like that, but it's just something to be aware of. So that is week 5. If you have any questions, please let me know.